The next morning, when we set out afoot for Caesarea, all the roads were choked with men, and not only the roads but the fields beside them, the crests of the hills. It was like some great swarming of insects crawling under the brazen sun beneath the high, clear sky. We didn't talk. We simply walked, our feet measuring off the stadia between Jerusalem and Caesarea. Now and again we stopped to rest, to eat, but other groups passed by us as we squatted on our haunches by the road, so that there was not one moment that the moving stream of humanity was still. And so we came to Caesarea, dust-covered, sweaty, mingling with other groups that had converged upon the provincial capital from every point of the compass. We stood before the procurator's palace, shouting, "Hear us, Epitropus! Listen to us! O representative of mighty Caesar, remove the signa from Jerusalem. Take away the bust of your imperator from the holy city." Over and over again, never ceasing from morning until night, all night long from sunset until dawn, taking turns so that our voices would not tire at the same time, nor fail nor cease. Let me say it, there was something admirable about Pilate, and that something was his domination of his nerves. He let us stand there before his palace in a close-packed group, howling without let-up, and did not appear at all. So now, seeing what they were up against, the chief men among us organized the matter better. They counted us off into centuries, and 3 centuries at a time before the palace, relieved this 300 men by a like number every hour, thus making sure we could keep up a deafening din. Thus it was that there were long periods during those 6 days when we made the very heavens echo with our pleas, our cries, that I was free to wander about Caesarea as I willed. Naturally, my first act was to seek out the Galilean delegation to see if my uncle Hezron was among them. He was. He embraced me, and seeing me clad in my Jewish the fringed garment, seeing my hair and beard grown long, he murmured some verses of the Tefillah over my head and shed tears of joy. To him, I was the prodigal returned, the lost sheep of Israel brought back into the fold. "You're entirely well, Nathan?" he said. Yes, I can see you are. I don't hold with the Essenes' doctrines, but I have to admit that they've done wonders for him," said that soft, deep voice at his side. "How are you, Nathan?" My heart stopped still. My breath. I was blinded with joy. The day blazed with radiance. Could he do miracles? One, surely. That he made you love him beyond all else in life. I dragged him into my arms, kissed his bearded face. "Yeshuah," I babbled. "Oh, Yeshuah." "Nathan," he said quietly, and smiled at me. The lingering ache in my middle went away, disappeared as though it had never been. My blood slowed, made a kind of quiet murmuring inside my veins, like bee drone on a lazy day. I could hear birds singing in the palace gardens through all the noise of shouting. A breeze tossed the lilies laughing. That was what Yeshuah HaNatzri did. That. "My brother Jacob is of that persuasion," he said, with a little amused chuckle, "though not of the monastic Essenes. He goes to the meetings of the town ones. He wears only linen cloths, never wool, and you ought to see his knees. They're like leather from so much kneeling, so much prayer." "You're pious enough, Yeshuah," my uncle Hezron said. Yeshuah smiled. But it doesn't cost me anything, sir, he said. To me, to love man is to love God, and both are a happiness. Poor Jacob is always weeping and wailing and scourging himself for his sins. Strange. If you love people, you can't sin. You simply can't. I'd recovered a little from the joy of seeing him by then, and there is nothing so irritating to one who possesses neither as simplicity as purity. Suppose one of those people is a woman, Yeshuah, I said. He went on smiling, answered me easily, and at once, if you love her, her name becomes Helvetia, Nathan, and you can't sin against her, you can't. I bowed my head. The crystal slivers of my tears pierced my eyes. He put his hand down on my shoulder. Don't weep, Nathan, he said. For whatever crimes you accuse yourself of, they are already forgiven you, my friend. Your tears have made a balm, and your sorrow has healed you. I looked at him in astonishment. He still spoke Aramaic, but his speech was beautiful now. Only a trace of the countrified Galilean accent lingered in it. He spoke like a rab, a teacher, a sage. He must have guessed my thought. I've studied with your uncle here, he said, for years now, ever since my father died, and also with some of Jacob's Essene Rabbin. They're wrong. They insult life by trying to run away from it, and thereby they insult God, who made life, although they don't mean to. But some of their ideas I like. Their method of counting the months, the years, for instance. That makes sense, and I've adopted it. Have you also adopted their method of foretelling the future, Yeshuah? I said. He looked at me with puzzled eyes. I've never heard of it, he said. Jacob has never mentioned it. My Uncle Hezron glared at me. It's unkind to make fun of the humble, Nathan, he said sternly. Besides, if you were as smart as you think you are, you'd realize that Yeshuah is no longer of the Amu Haaretz. I'd match his knowledge of the Torah against yours any day. I wouldn't, I said ruefully, because mine is plagued small, Uncle Hezron. I'm sure he'd leave me far behind in any discussion of the law, and I wasn't mocking him. I don't know about the town Essenes, but the Qumran group does have a method of reading the future. I don't know whether it works or not, because none of the things it predicted for me have come true so far, but I do know how to do it. This is blasphemy, my uncle said. No, Yeshuah said. No, Rabbi Hezron. No sincere search for knowledge is offensive to God, and the Essenes are sincere. You've known some of them, so you must know that. Yes, my uncle said grudgingly. I'll grant you that. They're good people, but their excessive concern with celibacy would destroy the race. Ho! I hooted. Look who's talking! Rab Hezron ben Matthiah, I salute you in the name of your many sons. The pain got into my uncle's eyes then. I could not wed, he said quietly. The only woman for me belongs to another. It's as simple as that. It was never a concern for any personal salvation at the expense of Israel, Nathan. Which reminds me, now that you are recovered, we'd better look around, for my anguish made a ball of fire and seared my throat. No, I said. By the unutterable name, Uncle Hezron, no. You've a duty to, my uncle began sternly, but Yeshuah laid a hand upon his arm. That hand was hard, work-brown, muscular. It radiated power, a power greater than its possessor knew. Later, Rabbi, he said, when time has healed his heart. Then he smiled at me. What says your prophecy as to that aspect of life, Nathan? That I'll wed and have many sons, but only after I've wasted years mooning after a woman who won't have me. Because she doesn't love you? My uncle said. No, Yeshuah said suddenly. I think it will be because she does. That's a very reasonable reason, I said. Have you ever known a reasonable woman? He said. No, I laughed. He took my arm, said lightly, pleasantly, yet somehow I knew that he wasn't jesting, that the matter concerned him, that he was worried, even anxious to know. Demonstrate your powers, Nathan. Read my future for me. Will you please? No, I said, not now. You'll have to wait until tonight, after the stars are out. I need to plot their movements. All right, but don't forget, Nathan, Yeshuah HaNatsri said. But I did forget. Until midnight, it was my sentry's turn to scream at Pilate, as fruitlessly as ever. When it was over, I retired to my father's tent to sleep. But as I approached it, I saw Yeshuah standing there. Two of his younger brothers, Yehuda and Shimeon, were with him. We've come, O Magi, he said solemnly, but there was a twinkle in his eye, that you tear away the veil that hides the future and tell us what fate will befall us. A flicker of anger rose in me. I was dog-tired, and I didn't believe in that eccentric nonsense anyhow, but Yeshuah smiled at me, and my anger vanished. Those other two great Galilean oafs were staring at me with their ox-like eyes. They had their father written all over them. Everything Yeshuah had, he got from Miriam. All his intelligence, his verve, his fire. All right, I sighed. Who wants to be first? I predict that you'll all be whipped, burned, crucified. Me? Shimeon said. Tell me, Rabbi, what? I'm not a rabbi, I said. I simply know some Kabbalistic tricks taught me by the Essenes. No, not even that. I learned from them without their realizing it, since such knowledge is forbidden. No knowledge is forbidden, Yeshuah said slowly. Tell my brother Shimeon his future, Nathan. I had of Shimeon his birthplace and date from Yeshuah's, the hour of it, and I plotted the signs. They fell out regularly, and in commonplace fashion. He would have sons, live many years, die in peace, full of honors. Only one thing was strange. Persistently, there appeared the sign that the Essenes define as the sons of the house of Peleg. And more often than not, it was accompanied by the darker sign which meant the dissemblers, the furtive ones. Now that last form was perfectly clear. The symbols formed the word Ne'alamin, dissemblers, time and time again. I couldn't imagine how anyone could find that characteristic in the Galilean yokel, with straw still in his hair, but the sons of the house of Peleg? How did I know it meant Peleg? All next system of plotting the signs could do to spell out letters. Now in Hebrew and Aramaic both, all the letters are consonants. To write the vowels, we have to point them with tiny symbols, usually dots, straight lines, or crosses, placed above or below, or sometimes even inside the loops of the consonants, to indicate what particular vowel is to follow the consonant, so vowel pointed. Now, the trouble with this plotting of the signs was that there was no way of indicating what the vowel points were. Footnote. Actually, this system of vowel points was not present at this time in history. It was not. That would be later with the Masoretes. Actually, the sign the see, right? This guy's trying to give some sort of Jewish education, but he doesn't know. The writer, that is. Anyway, back to it. Actually, the sons of the house of Peleg was composed only of the three letters Pei, Lamet, Gimel, or reading from right to left, as you must in Hebrew, Pei, Lameth, Gimel. Gimel, Lameth, Pei. I sat there staring at those letters, trying to imagine what other vowel points to mark them with to give them a different sound than Peleg. But I couldn't think of any. I wrote that word over and over again until finally it came to me that if you took away the symbol for Bainim, the sons of, which it didn't have anyhow, which the Essenes had arbitrarily assigned to it, Peleg didn't have to be a noun. It could also be the infinitive of the verb to divide. Taken that way, it reinforced the dark, nay, alamine symbol. The signs were obviously trying to tell me, to warn me, that this big dumb ox was designed to be a deceiver and one who would divide Israel. Told you it was nonsense, I said. Yeshuah shook his head. It's strange, he said, but I believe in your powers, Nathan. Tell us about Yehuda now. Yehuda's the same, but in addition to the signs for Ne Alamine, the PLG, there were more curious, confused signs extending beyond his life, being torn, scattered by a prince of the Kittim. Now I believe that by the Kittim the Essenes mean the Romans. But how could I be sure? I told him that. He shrugged. It be all tricks and fakery, Yeshu, said he. All right, I said to Yeshua. It's your turn now. You were also born in Nazareth, weren't you? Yes, he said. He told me the season and the hour, having had them of Miriam, who, as mothers will with their firstborn, had fixed those quite unimportant details in his mind. I cast the lots, drew up the signs. I did it over again, 3 times 5. They varied not at all. They said that he would be hanged like a felon, like a thief among a group of thieves. I told him that. He bowed his head. His lips moved in prayer. Yes, he whispered, his dark eyes somber, big with pain. Yes, perhaps it will be so, if it can't be helped. All right, But afterward, Nathan? Afterward? I said. After I'm dead. After I've gone to my Father. What happens then? I looked at the signs. They were terribly confused, so I cast them again. And now they became clear, and made a horror. I looked at them, at Yeshuah, said, "No." "Tell me," he said. "No," I answered. "It's no good. You'll do what you have to do." He stared at me, demanded again. That authority of his that was like stone, like steel, ringing through his voice. "Tell me, Nathan." No wonder that even knowing it was not so, men could believe him of David's line. He could be truly kingly when he wanted to be. "All right," I said, "but first you tell me something, Yeshuah. Are you about to begin something? To embark upon some mission, say?" He said, "Yes," like that, very quietly. I said, "Don't." And he said, "Why not?" "You insist upon my telling you. All right, these signs, your stars, say that if you do this thing unknowing, it is bad enough. But if you go into it knowing, you become the greatest criminal in the long tides of human history. Yeshuah still want me to tell you?" He said, "Yes," just as quietly, as simply as before, with no hesitation at all. "All right. You will drown your people, Israel, in blood, or our teachings will. Year in, year out, they will be beaten, broken, slaughtered by the Kittim because of you." I could hear my voice deepening, darkening, growing brazen with thunder, hear the note of prophecy getting into it. How do I know these things? I thought. But I knew them. Oh, I knew. "Go on," he said. I looked down at his feet. As usual, they were bare. He wore a simple, seamless robe. Wild laughter tore me. It made a taste of blood, of brine in my throat. "Why do you laugh?" he said. "Look at you," I cried, "barefoot and poor, a carpenter's son. Do you know I see temples erected in your name whose towers pierce the sky? A whole priesthood clad in silks and gold, blazing with jewels, bowing before graven images made in your likeness, though they've given you silken hair and a Kittim's, a Gentile's face. They won't even leave you your Jewishness, Yeshu. They'll make of you a pagan god. They'll make of you a pagan god, a god of the Gentiles. And they, your priests, your Kittim, gentle priests clad in tall crowns and brilliant in silks, will sit in judgment over your people Israel, and over all the earth. Your people, my people, will twist in the fire, scream from the rack, die in the chambers of the choking smoke. Stop it, he said. Welter in the trenches as the Kittim point the speaking spears, the flaming arrows that talk with the voices of thunder, that split lightnings at them. Stop it, Nathan, he said. You will give Israel into the hands of the uncircumcised, the dead at your charge, for your iniquity will be as the sands of the sea. The strength went out of me suddenly. The towering flame sank down. If you persist, I whispered, in this, his eye kindled. Meeting mine, they shriveled my very soul. His anger was terrible. all the more so because it had so much sorrow in it. "Get thee behind me, Satan," he said. Then turning, he left me there, going so quietly I heard no sound at all. I avoided him after that. 5 days later, at long last, Lucius Pontius Pilatus appeared at the high window above the hoarse-voiced, howling mob. He hadn't changed since I'd seen him last in Rome. His lean, dark face was as mocking as sardonic. He raised his arms above the sun-bright glitter of his breastplate. "My friends," he said, "my gentle Jewish friends, I beg of you to cease your howling and retire to the stadium. There at the 10th hour, tomorrow, I will come and address you from the rostrum. Surely, as civilized men, we should be able to settle our differences amicably. Salve, O men of Judea, in the divine name of the Imperator, I salute you." Then he was gone, leaving that last deadly insult to a people to whom only God was divine and his name so holy as to be unutterable, lingering on the evening air. In the stadium that next morning, I stood between my father and my uncle waiting. Then I saw Yeshuah standing a little way off with his brothers. They were all there, Yehuda, Shimeon, Yose, and even the wild one, the Ebionite, Essene one, Jacob. I tried to turn my eyes away from Yeshuah, but I couldn't, so I attempted to take refuge in anger. But I couldn't do that either. His eyes were on me, soft, compelling. I did what he bade me without opening his mouth. I left my father and my uncle and went to him. He smiled at me, kissed my cheek, said, "Forgive me my anger, Nathan. And you, the things I said," I whispered. He shook his head, a little sadly. "There's nothing to forgive. You spoke truth, as you saw it," he said. "And I—" But a roar broke from the crowd. Pilatus was mounting the rostrum. He stood there, looking down at all of us, his eyes cold with contempt, his mouth curled in a smile as cruel as death. "Disperse," he cried. "Go back to your homes." "No!" someone roared. "Not until you take the signa of the legions and the icon of the Imperator out of Jerusalem." Then we were all shouting it, cracking heaven itself with the thunder of our voices. Pilatus raised his hand. From every side the trumpets sounded. Our voices died. There was no sound now, but the clanking of the cohorts coming on. They swarmed over the stands, their armor sun-bright terrible. They came through the gates, beneath the rostras. From there the athletes and the beast usually came. In less time than it takes to write this, they had us all surrounded. Another signal from Pilatus, and they drew their swords. The gladii made a hard glitter, throwing the light into our faces. "All right," Pilatus mocked us. "Will you disperse, you Jewish dogs, or do you prefer to die?" I was looking at Yeshuah, so I'd swear he did it first. Afterward, my uncle and my father told me the movement was spontaneous and simultaneous on the parts of hundreds of men. But I saw him move forward, quietly and serenely, until he was inches from a legendary blade. Then, without a word, he knelt and bared his breast. His brothers knelt beside him, did the same. I rushed to join them. Then my father, my uncle, every man there, knelt with bared breast, with neck inclined for the cohort's strokes. Pilate stood there, strangling upon his rage, until his face purpled, turned black. He was gazing upon things he could never understand, the meaning of faith, the significance of honor. Then he bowed his head, acknowledged his defeat. "Sheath swords," he croaked. "Leave them." The next day, by his orders, the signa and the imperator's icon were removed from Jerusalem. We had won. At least the first battle.